And joining us now, of course, former player at South Carolina. You may have seen her recent over last season broadcasting on SEC Network Plus. Now the new head coach at GW. I speak of Chrissy Schoonmaker, who joins us. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thanks for hosting me. I was honored to get a call from you and looking forward to having a great conversation with you.
Well, let's start with that new title of yours, head coach. How does that feel now? It's been, I think, over a week since the announcement. Is it still kind of unique? Just tell us a little bit about that process of becoming the head coach at GW.
Yeah, no, it's been great. It's been a little bit overwhelming in the best type of ways. The support has been phenomenal from the coaching community, from my colleagues, from our student athletes. So it's something I've been working towards and hoping to have the opportunity to become a head coach, and really grateful to George Washington University for this opportunity.
What was it about George Washington that caught your eye that you felt this was the right time for you? Because you have a lot, we'll get into it. You've had a lot of options. You've been an assistant. You have been doing some broadcasting. What was it about this one that you felt this was the right time for me to be the head coach and this was the right place?
Yeah, I think so much about opportunities is fit and making sure it's the right fit for who you are as an individual, who I am as a leader, who the administration was at GW was really intriguing to me. So I walked on campus. I had a great interview process with Tanya Vogel, the athletic director. The student athletes were phenomenal. They've been phenomenal past tense since I've taken the job. And just really throughout the interview process, as far as what GW is about, it's really big on the university is really big on changing the world and changing lives one life at a time. And anything that I've done in my career is to make an impact on student athletes. And I felt like George Washington really fit holistically with who I am as a leader. So it's really been a great marriage so far. High academic institution, high athletic institution. They just won the A10 last year. They had a phenomenal season, and I think the program is set up to be really successful here moving forward. So there's a lot to be said about George Washington, about this job. I also love being on the East Coast. I'm an East Coast girl through and through. Grew up in Florida, played softball at South Carolina. I've kind of traveled around the country in some different coaching roles, but Washington, D.C. is a beautiful city. George Washington's campus is right in the heart of downtown. I think it's 6 blocks from the White House, 4 blocks from the Lincoln Memorial. So it's really an awesome opportunity, and I'm just really looking forward to diving in.
Was the head coach always the ultimate goal? Was that something you were looking for? Or is that just something that happened?
I think it's always the ultimate goal, and it's always been the ultimate goal, but it wasn't something that I had to have in this moment. And I think I've been a really great assistant over time. I'm loyal, I work hard, I'm prepared, I'm organized, all the things that I think head coaches want in their assistants. I've been those things, and I think now I'm ready to take this next step. And I think I've been ready for a little while to be able to take the next step. But it's really important. Again, I think you want to take a job where you can go and you can be successful. It's a fit. You can be yourself. You can be the leader that I want to be able to show up as myself every day. And I really got the sense at George Washington that I was going to be able to do that. So it wasn't something that I was just had to have, but it's something that for me, this is the right time, the right place, the right moment to do it.
And it's a program that's had success. They just made the NCAA tournament there. So they're kind of there. You're not in a situation where you're starting from scratch. There is things you're inheriting that you could have success right away. You could add to it.
And that's the plan, to go in and right away contend for A10 titles. Like you said, they won the A10 last year, had a great run. Lang was the pitcher of the year. The A10 pitcher of the year. She comes back. She's returning for a senior season. Jenna Cohn, obviously an All-American, has graduated, so some offensive numbers to graduate. But the culture of the team, the atmosphere, the program, the energy surrounding it, the investment from the administration into the softball program is just through the roof. So it's a great. I think it's a great job. I think it's a great place, and I cannot wait to work with these student athletes.
I think the big thing that should be working to, I think GW must have liked too. You've coached in the American Conference. You've coached at, UConn, so you've recruited in the Northeast, so you have experience there. But you've also recruited in the SEC when you were at your time at South Carolina. You've recruited in the Big 12. You've been across the country nationally. You have connections that could bring the GW that not many can.
And that's something we talked about. I think that does play a role in their process. Again, I think I was the right fit for them because of who I am as a leader and how I show up every day. But we certainly recruiting is a lifeblood to any type of program. And I think, success day in and day out is who do you recruit into your program? That's your staff, your people. Who are your people? And recruiting is a big piece of that. So I do have national ties from recruiting at Connecticut, South Carolina, Houston, Texas Tech, Harvard. I've been able to establish ties really at different places. We've recruited from California, from Texas, from the Southeast, from the Northeast. So I do have a brand and a national brand, I feel like, with coaches to be able to try to pull that GW name and really just build upon my recruiting ties and build upon GW success.
What's your philosophy? Obviously, if we'll get into you've coached under a lot of great coaches as well as played for a legendary coach. Kind of what philosophy do you bring into GW for those fans that are going to watch your team? What do they expect to see on the field?
I think you're going to see a team that plays fast. You're going to see a team that's really hungry, that hustles. You're also going to see a team that's humble. I don't want a team of arrogant people. I think that we'll be really confident on the field. We'll take the field really confidently, but we'll have a hunger about us. And that's, we're not stopping. We're running through the bag. We're diving out on plays. They're going after every ball hard. They're sliding in hard. I think you're going to see a team that's really competitive, that likes to work. So when I think about it, my brand of GW softball and what I would like the team to look like with me as a leader, it's humble, it's hungry, it's aggressive. We'll play clean defense. We're going to be sharp on the mound, but we're going to do things the right way, and we're really going to get after it.
What was it about softball that got you invested into playing it and then eventually coaching it? Because you mentioned you're a Florida kid. You played a lot of different sports. You were a great athlete here in the state of
Thank you.
Florida. So you could have done a lot of different things, but you chose the softball path. Why?
Yeah. So I mean, softball for me started when I was a kid. My brother was actually playing baseball. He's 18 months older. Shout out to Big Brother. He was playing baseball, and I was a little sister that wanted to come to the field with him. So I would beg my parents to let me play catch with him. So if my dad was playing in the air with my brother, I got to play too. And then really just got the itch to play softball. Started playing softball, as an 8U and Little League. So shout out to Little League, because I think that's a foundation of a lot of great softball players, is just starting and learning the fundamentals of the game. I did play a lot of sports growing up, played basketball, track, soccer, volleyball, you name it. I had my hand in it. And I think that helped me to develop some athleticism. But softball for me was just the sport that I always came back to. It was something that I just loved. I got to compete. I loved hitting. I loved taking ground balls. I was a pitcher actually growing up all through high school until I got into college, where I was a middle infielder. But I just loved softball. I think it's a game where you learn about resilience, you learn about adversity. There's a lot of lessons that you're learning about life through the game of softball, and it's something that's just really stuck with me to this day.
How much did that help you too? Because I've talked to a lot of different coaches that actually, from a recruiting standpoint, they like recruiting kids that don't just play softball, that they play other sports because that shows their competitiveness. Plus, it reduces the chances of a burnout. Did that help you as well? And is that something you look at as well as when you go into recruiting?
I do think it helped me as a student athlete growing up, just to be able to come to softball with fresh eyes. Like I can remember coming out of basketball season, we'd played, we were really aggressive, we'd gone to districts, whatnot, going into postseason, and then coming to the softball field and softball being, rejuvenated. I never got burnt out from softball. I know that happens sometimes just with the sheer volume games that people are playing. But I think those other sports just enhanced my athletic profile. I think they made me better. They refined some different muscles. Basketball, I was never in better shape than when I was coming out of basketball and soccer seasons, because you run and your fitness level is so high that when I'm coming into softball, my fitness level was just increased because of those other sports. Volleyball helped me on jumping skills, on approach and attack. So maybe I could snag a ball over my head a little bit better because of volleyball.
Yeah, great. That's good. And you ended up going to South Carolina. You
I
play
did.
for Coach Joyce Compton. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was a phenomenal experience for me. Joyce was a Hall of Famer. She's inducted into the NFCA Hall of Fame. Joyce was really, really sharp on the details of the game, and I think I learned a lot about softball from her. The different things, the different ways to look at things defensively. We practiced rundowns. She'd toss the ball up, and from any spot on the field, if you get in this rundown, you've got to know how to execute it. So it was something she drilled into us. From base running, just like where can you get the advantages on this part of first base? This is where you can be if the ball's hit. This is where you can be on second base if the ball's hit to center, if the ball's hit to left. So she was really big on right from the start in a season, teaching us the details and just little advantages that we could gain as student athletes. And I think that has helped me as a coach, because there's things now you don't recognize it as a player, but there's things now that I do that I'm like, that's because of Joyce Compton. So I had a great experience working, being a part of Joyce Compton's roster and playing for South Carolina. I wouldn't change that for the world.
You got into coaching after that. What motivated you to get into coaching after your playing days?
Sure. So I think everybody's path into coaching is a little bit different. I did not know I was going to be a coach. I actually thought I wanted to do sports psychology, work with children, and I knew I wanted to give back to the sport, but I did not know I was going to become a coach. And I was actually working for South Carolina, finishing my master's degree. I'd come back from an injury after my senior season, and I was finishing my master's, and I got the opportunity to work at Drew High School, which is a school right in the heart of Columbia, downtown Columbia. So I was like, oh, this is great. I'll work my full-time job. I'll finish my master's, and then I'll go to the softball field, for my evenings and back to the game. And I started just dreaming about softball again during my day job. And I realized that maybe everyone around me knew maybe what they were talking about, because I had been offered some coaching positions. People were like, you got to coach. This is your thing. Like, you're so good at it. And it's kind of was not denying it. I just didn't think that was my path. And then I realized once I started coaching that this is absolutely what I wanted to do, and then started to pursue that. Beverly Smith took the job at South Carolina when Joyce Compton retired, and a couple people had reached out and said, if you get an opportunity to work for Bev, you've got to take it. And I would say this on this podcast, there's been no bigger influence in my life than Beverly Smith, from a coaching standpoint, from a mentor standpoint. So I had the opportunity to come and be a volunteer coach on her staff, her first 2 seasons at South Carolina. And it really just shaped my coaching career and fulfilled that, like, this is what I want to do. She was great. Calvin Beeman, Janelle Brenneman, Beverly Smith, they allowed me to touch a lot of aspects of the program. Obviously, I couldn't go out on the road and recruit, but I would spend time with Bev in the bullpen, time on the infield defense with Janelle, time with hitters with Cal, and really got to touch a lot of areas and just, see it from that ground level of this is, and really just, this is what I wanted to do.
That's a good coaching tree. You just right, right, you just promoted right there. There, Beverly Smith and Coach Brenneman's done a great job at UNCG there. What was that like to be a part of that staff? I mean, you work with 2 head coaches. One, obviously Beverly, and a future one in Janelle, who's done great things at UNCG.
Sure. It was a phenomenal experience. I say it all the time that experience really has shaped my coaching journey. I think something that I will pull from now moving forward is I've gotten to work for 2 first-year head coaches. So Beverly Smith was a first-year head coach here at South Carolina. Jen McIntyre was a first-year head coach at the University of Connecticut. I worked for both of them for multiple years. And I think watching people take over a program, implement their strategies, their goals, their vision for that program has been really instrumental in my coaching career. And I know it'll serve me moving forward, but it was awesome. Bev and Janelle had worked together for many years at North Carolina. So they had great rapport with one another. I think they valued me. They made me feel valued. They really allowed me to touch a lot and be a part of a lot with that program. And it's been something that now, as I progress into this role, that I want to pay it forward because of how they led me.
You paid your dues, which you have to in this coaching industry. You went to Texas
Sure.
Tech. You went to Houston, got to the NCAA tournament there with Kyla Hollis as the head coach, the Uten sisters and company. I know them very well. You see, I cover that very well. Then you went to UConn with Jen McIntyre and really build a program from the bottom up against really a lot of odds against it, quite honestly. Like, you guys were very competitive in the American. Just talk about those experiences, because I'm sure you took something from each one that you're going to apply here now as a head coach.
I have. And I think that, thank you for saying I paid my dues. I think everybody's coaching journey is really different. I'm grateful for every step of mine. Every step along the way, I've learned something, whether it be to be a better recruiter, how to, how to talk hitting in a different way, how to, interact with different student athletes. But my time at Texas Tech was my first full-time job. So that, I got to dive right into the recruiting trail. There were 7 or 8 weekends in the fall. It was before the fall window had really been established that I was just out meeting contacts, I built really strong Texas ties during that time period, which has served me, even to this day. Sierra Lang is actually a Texas product. We recruited her at Connecticut. She ended up at George Washington, and now I get to, full circle moment, get to coach her after having recruited her as a coach that many years ago. But I built great Texas ties then. I learned a lot about hitting from Shannon Hayes, had a great experience as a recruiter, moved to Houston, where I also led the infield defense there, had led the defense at Tech, and Kyla Hollis is a great pitching mind. So I learned a lot about pitching from her. She's really aggressive on the base pass, the way she called the game, had an opportunity to work with her. Again, Houston was a great contender. You said it, Haley Uten and Deidre Uten are two outstanding athletes. I still talk to them to this day. Anytime I see a sunset, I text it to them. Their mother passed away from leukemia, and they talk about sunsets being how they communicate with their mom. So we often send sunset pictures back and forth. I just say, "Mom's." But they were two great student athletes. Haley was an All-American at Houston, and it was a great experience for me. Living in a big city, I learned that at Houston, which I think will serve me well here in Washington, D.C. And then I had the opportunity to work on Jen McIntyre's staff at Connecticut for 5 seasons. I had the opportunity to go from being the second assistant to move to Connecticut to being the one, staying in the American Athletic League. And again, great experience there. We beat Texas A&M. They were number 7 at the time with a freshman, Brie Marcelino, who hit a grand slam. So the program was moving in the right direction. Again, building something from the ground up. The program had transitioned from the Big East to the American Athletic Conference, which was quite a jump from a competitive standpoint. At the time, the American was the fourth ranked conference RPI wise as a whole. So really challenging conference, really great experience, and allowed me to build big recruiting ties in the Northeast region and really this Mid-Atlantic region. I dove a lot into Virginia. Jen McIntyre was from Virginia, so I was able to strengthen recruiting ties in the VA region, which again will help me now being in the heart of Washington, D.C. But everywhere I've been, I've learned something along the way. And I'm grateful for every head coach that took a chance on me and hired me and gave me an opportunity. And again, looking to do the same thing now as a head coach myself.
Yeah, no question. And by the way, that McIntyre staff, everybody's gone into, I think, a head coaching position at one point there. But, you mentioned, of course, being in the American, that was the 4th strongest conference. There's a lot of potential in the A10 as well.
Yeah.
Very strong league that I think they're, and I know in talking to coaches in the A10, you believe they could be a multi-bid league like they have been in the past with programs like Fordham, obviously pushing GW and Dayton and among. Just talk about the league, because this is a competitive league and it's going to be obviously competitive talent up in the Northeast.
I do think it's a really competitive league. George Washington obviously had a great run last season, winning the A10, getting an NCAA bid. That will be the goal and will continue to be the goal. That'll be a conversation piece that we have with our team is, let's go win the league. Let's go win the A10. And from there, I think you write your destiny. I think every team is always, mission focused on being one of those 64 teams that's called on Selection Sunday. And that will be no different for our team moving forward. But the strength of the league in the A10, exactly what you said, Fordham's got a new coach in Melissa Inouye. She hasn't been there very long. She's relatively new. Danielle Henderson just got hired at UMass. She's a former Olympian. There's great competition in the league. New coach at URI. Dayton's got a competitive program. I just think top to bottom with the league, there is competition, and I'm just really looking forward to playing in the A10.
And it's a league that could definitely be a multi-bid league. It's been in the past, and it's even in the past hosted, in different times of the sport. There, how will you schedule? How will that affect your schedule? What's your philosophy when it comes to scheduling?
Currently working through that right now, Eric. I just got off a call with my sport oversight. We were talking the 2022 schedule. I think anything you do in the preseason, no matter what league you're in, you're always trying to prepare for that conference slate. Within the A10, I do believe that winning the league is that's how you're going to get your bid. That's how it would happen for the 2022 year. I do believe in the future and potentially this year it could be a multi-bid league, and I think that's the goal for us as a conference. We'll continue to have those conversations, but I think scheduling some competition that's early and elite will help this group to be able to prepare for A10, to put us in a position where we're helping the RPI of the league increase because we played some better competition early. Have yet to schedule some of those preseason tournaments. I'm in conversations with a couple different coaches that have emailed and reached out, but still right now working through that 2022 preseason scheduling slate to again ultimately prepare us for A10, where we hope to make a run.
Let's talk about your last year, which has been sort of unique because you were an assistant at Harvard, but the Ivy League doesn't play. They decided not to play the season and everything with the
Sure.
protocols. You end up doing some broadcasting. Like I watched you. I remember watching one day. I'm like, wait a minute, she's doing broadcasting there. What was that experience like? How unique was that? Where you're coaching, but you can't coach, so you just you're going to broadcasting your alma mater, and I'm fascinated by it because I would imagine you picked up some things as a broadcaster. You're not the first person to have, this is kind of common in a lot of sports where broadcasters come from the booth and learn some things as they get back into coaching and things like that. What was this last year like for you?
Sure. I think if for this last year for all of us, we learned a lot about flexibility. We learned a lot about resilience. I mean, you can talk about it top to bottom. All of us throughout the country learned these things, right? Everybody was experiencing something a little bit different, a little bit uncomfortable that challenged them. Not having a season at Harvard was certainly a challenge for our student athletes, certainly a challenge for our staff. Point for us is for our team was to prepare for the upcoming year and what can we control in this moment. We talked a lot about performance training, what's our mindset, making sure that we were in a good place to be able to do that. For me, the opportunity came up again for me to call games for a second season at the University of South Carolina. And for me, it was a no-brainer. We weren't playing. I had a conversation with Jenny Allard, my head coach at Harvard at the time, and she was fully supportive of it. So I did. I called the games on the SEC Network Plus here out of Columbia. Was in the booth by myself because of the pandemic. We weren't sharing a booth, so that piece was a little bit challenging. Trying to, you're learning how to dance with your broadcast partner, and usually you're in the same room, so you've got some hand signals like, "Hey, I'm going to lead you in here."
Yep.
You're laughing, when someone's about to speak. So we worked through that to try to limit the bumps, I guess, on air. But I loved the experience of broadcasting, and I absolutely learned some things from it. One of the cool things for me as a coach was that I had the ability, as a broadcaster and an analyst, to go pregame and talk to head coaches. So clearly I got a chance to talk with Coach Smith quite often in South Carolina. I'd go out and watch their practices as well. But from when visiting teams would come in, I asked them if I could come watch a practice, and B, if I could interview them prior to the game. So I got a chance to talk with Larissa Anderson, with Courtney Deifel, with Ralph and Carrie Weekly, with Cindy Baum-Malone, anybody that was coming into these games for a 3-game set. I had the opportunity to interview, on day one, and then we could chat day two. What do you like? What adjustments are you making?
Sure.
What's your talking point to your team? And then going into day 3. So I really took a lot out of those conversations just from what different people were doing with their teams to prepare them in game 2 and game 3, what their adjustments might look like. But I am really grateful to the coaches because I felt like they just really welcomed me. They gave me open arms, but there was no question that was out of bounds or off limits. So I gained a lot of insight into how people were training their teams, what they were doing, just some new ideas. Every time I walked away from a coaching interview, I had 4 or 5 things that I was, go home. Like, what is this vision training tool? Like, I want to learn something. So I loved it. And then the time in the booth, 30,000 foot view, you see shifts a little bit differently when you're sitting bird's eye view than you do when you're in either the first base or the third base dugout. So my game, I guess, sense, kind of that view really broadened. And I think that'll help me as I become a head coach, because you've got to keep that 30,000 foot view.
Well, now you also know how to deal with the media now. Now you know what it's like on the other side. So now when you get questions in the post game, now you know where it's coming from.
Sure. It's a big piece of it, but I tell you what you guys do, Eric, what the media does, I think, for the promotion of the sport is, coaches are really welcoming to that, because we understand that it's just helping to promote our student athletes. It's helping to promote the game of softball. So I certainly appreciate it.
Was broadcasting something that you wanted to do? Was it something that somebody brought it up to you? How did that all come about? Because you mentioned it wasn't your first year. You've done it before. What
Yeah.
was it that got you into the booth?
It was Justin Stoll, who now is an associate AD at the NC State University. He worked here at the time at the University of South Carolina. And my first and second year on Bev staff, he was, part of this production team for Gamecock Live, and they would follow us around with microphones and do this kind of extreme access stuff. And he's like, "Hey, I think you'd be really good at, on air. The game. You're a coach. You know how to talk softball. You've got a great personality, disposition." And he kind of, threw it out there to me a couple years ago, and I was like, "Okay, I'll try it." And I did it with Megan Matthews Bunning, who's now at Florida State, leading a coaching program there, and Brad Mueller, who does the play-by-play. And I loved it. So I was in a box with them, a 3-person team, and then this year had the opportunity to go it solo with Brad. So Justin really was the the one that brought it up to me offered me the, hey, just try this. Let me know what you think. And then this year, the second year, they're like, hey, you're in town. Every game is yours if you want it. So we weren't playing. So, it goes back to that making lemons out of,
Sure.
making lemonade out of lemons. So we didn't play, but this opportunity presented itself. And I coached remote with Harvard. We did Zooms and Chalk Talks and all of that. And then in the evenings, I would go to South Carolina and call their games.
Well, and imagine as an analyst role, you're thinking as a coach, you're thinking as the game is developing, and you're probably in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, I would do this, I would consider doing this, right? I mean, how much of that too is kind of like, all right, I'm getting coach, I'm still coaching, even though I'm an analyst, but you're thinking the game as a coach because that's part of the role.
It certainly allowed me to put myself in that position. Who would I hit here, right? I've got my sheet in front of me that says maybe somebody is 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts. This isn't the best matchup. So in my head, I'm like, who that could come into this role? Who would I maybe pinch hit in this position? So I certainly was putting myself into those moments. I think one of the things in the box that, and as a head coach and as a coach, you're always kind of, is it too quick to pull the trigger on a pitching change, or is now the right moment, but they're doing well. So, really kind of learning that sense of when to pull someone in, when to maybe make a change. I think you get a sense of that when you're a little bit more removed from it because you can feel the pressure, but you're not the one necessarily in the moment. So I definitely was putting myself in those game situations of what would I do here? What would I call? Like, hey, this would be a great time for a squeeze. Look, the defense is back. So that was something that Brad Mueller, my play-by-play partner, really questioned me about. And he would ask like, hey, what would you do here? So he allowed me to have those conversations on the air. And I really enjoyed the experience. So I certainly grew as a coach because of it.
Well, I'll miss hearing your voice. So, from a selfish standpoint, but I am excited about you being back in the dugout, and that'll be kind of my last question. There is now you get to inherit this team. You're going to learn this team. They're going to learn you. You're obviously in the process of building your staff. But what's the goal between now and February? What are the keys from now till February that you want to accomplish to make sure you're all ready and on the same ready to go once that season starts in 2022 in February?
Sure. I think first and foremost, it's building the relationships with the student athletes. Talked to a lot of people over the last week, really over the last 15 years of my career. But this last week, I've talked to a lot of head coaches, and one of the greatest pieces of advice was something that Jamie Trashel told me at Ole Miss. And she and I were on the phone, we were chatting, and she's like, "You've got to build this from the inside out." The inside out meaning your players, your staff, your recruits, and then all the other things are going to start to take care of themselves, right? Like there's the paperwork, there's all these big picture things, but the most important things are your people. So for me, it's really pouring time into the student athletes, really pouring time into a staff, making sure that we're really in lockstep when we go into February and we start our slate. But for me, again, it goes to culture. I talk about 3 things: culture, recruiting. We've got to recruit the right athletes, recruit the right staff members, recruit the right student athletes, and then player development. So we'll spend a lot of time this fall making sure that we're prepared as a team to be able to go and crush it in February. But inside from the inside out and really working those relationships, because I'm a new coach to them, they're new student athletes to me, and I think it's really important that they understand my investment in them and that that's genuine, and I want to see them be successful. So we'll spend a lot of time just working through their goals. Who do they want to be? What do they want to accomplish in this in their journey at GW?
Well, Coach, we're excited for you here. We're excited you get the head coaching job. We'll be following you closely at GW. We're excited for you. You got a lot of people really supporting you. I mean, the overwhelming support on social media once it was announced was huge, which speaks a lot about how people really respect what you've done and really how they think of you. So, congrats on that. Thank you for taking the time. I know it's a busy time for you, but this was a blast, and we'll definitely talk soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it, Eric. Thank you for what you do for softball, for student athletes, and I appreciate you setting this up. Glad to have a great conversation with you.